For more information regarding the local impact of the Bay Area wildfires here in Cupertino, please visit cupertino.org/2020fires.
And the challenge that we're going to face, and the fact that as it gets hotter and drier in that type of material, we're going to see smokes popping up, and it'll create a lot of calls for service, especially as we repopulate more areas, so that we will have crews going out and fully extinguishing that. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge for us for the time being. Again, the line's put in there. The Highway 1 corridor is looking really good. Caltrans is completing their process of rendering the roadway safe. The utility lines are just about completed in, and we should see the reopening of that Highway 1 corridor in the very near future. So that's really good news. The southern end of the fire is continuing to look good. The Highway 9 corridor every day is getting better and better. We do have line put in. We do have hose lines put in among those homes. It's looking really, really good. We're getting full extinguishment of that area. However, as I've been saying time and again, a lot is really steep terrain. We do have the rollout of the materials. We're seeing that every day. Yesterday we had an incident where we did find a spot outside of the line. So fortunately, one of our helicopters was flying, was able to detect that, and we were able to get in there and extinguish that fire. So it just lends itself to the reasoning of why we've kept some of the areas haven't repopulated, because we are still discovering some of those hot spots and the really rare, but it does occur, spots outside of our line. And so we have a heavy presence in there. We're patrolling it. We're continuing to mop up. So again, that's kind of the nature of the situation. This large fire, the type of fuels we're in, and so forth, is that these things are popping up, and why we really are trying to be as conservative as we can about repopulation, because we just don't want to keep people in and then have something happen and have to evacuate again. That's not our intention. That's not what we want to do. So when we repopulate, we want to make sure people go back in, that they're able to stay back in, and that they have the comforts that they have as far as their utilities being operable and livable conditions. So for those folks that are still evacuated, that is a concern of ours. That's why we haven't repopulated all areas, but we are into a process every day of evaluating that. We are going to be doing that later this morning, and I feel very, very confident that we're going to see significant repopulation in the coming day or days within various parts of this fire. Some of it, due to some of the areas, is still a lot of work to be done, so it's going to take a little bit longer. So again, please be patient and bear with us on that. The Bonnie Dune area is one of those areas. A lot of devastation in there, and so it's been a lot of work in rendering that safe, and we're getting very close to that. There's a lot of work being done by the utility companies because of the devastation to the infrastructure, where they're doing really hard work to get that reestablished. PG&E will be flying poles in via helicopter to set the poles and the major transmission lines. That's an ongoing work in progress, and all along the roadways. So that's the other thing from a hazard standpoint, is there's just so much work being done there. It's very hazardous to be driving in those areas, even with the controlled stops. It takes a long time even for our personnel to move among that area, just because of the utility companies doing their long and hard work that they've been doing. So that's kind of the status there. Our aircraft, we are still flying the aircraft when we can. The weather hasn't been really cooperative as of the past few days, but when we do have the window, we're flying our aircraft. They've been dropping. We're probably about, on an average, about 100,000 gallons a day, in part because of the shorter flight hours, and then also in part the fact that we are getting a lot of control, and there are fewer and fewer hot spots. But when we can fly them, we're working them, and they're doing their bit. So with the coming weather, that'll start clearing up the window and open that up for us to fly even more. We'll have a lot more flights going on, and they'll be helping our ground crews doing fire suppression efforts. The weather, if we have an ability to look at this chart a little bit, this is a chart being done every day by the National Weather Service. Our instant meteorologist puts together this really good matrix for us. It's a great graph, especially for our fire suppression personnel. You can just take a quick look and get a good concept about what we're facing weather-wise. As you can see, it's color-coded from moderate to elevated to extreme burning conditions. There are certain number factors that, really, unless you're in tune with weather, it means something to you. But if not, for folks that really aren't educated into it, you can just take a quick snapshot and see that as we're moving into the week, we're going to see some days where we have some very extreme potential for weather conditions. Everything from the heat to the relative humidity, which is the moisture in the air, or the lack thereof. I mean, and then what's something called a Haynes index, which is for firefighters, it means a lot. The higher that number, the more potential for fire to have catastrophic or great amount of growth when it burns. And then we're looking at our wind patterns changing. We've been seeing a south pattern, something coming in off the ocean. Now it's changing to something that's a little bit more onshore. That means drier conditions, and that corresponds again with what we're seeing there. So as we're moving forward, it's getting more and more conducive to actual extreme burning conditions, and that's something that we're watching. And again, why, as we get closer to that, when it starts drying out, gets hotter, we'll see more of the smokes popping up, and obviously we'll get more calls for service as people see those smokes out there. And we do, welcome and encourage that, because we want to make sure that we take care of those before they become any sort of issue.
Chief, Renata on Twitter wants to know, first of all, she says, thank you for your hard work. What is the status of the lines in Butino Canyon, and have you completed the burnout there?
So just as I was going over in the briefing, Butino is just starting to wrap up as far as we've completed our line as of last night. They put it in the final piece of line. So today the mission is to continue to improve that line, to make sure it's even more bulletproof. It is in steep terrain, so we put in like little catch basins on the line because it's very steep, so that if anything rolls down, it gets caught in there. It's just something we do. It's called trenching on what we call underslung line. So we're taking those precautions. We're improving, making the lines even wider, using our National Guard crews to do that. And we're doing full extinguishment. So then we're putting in, or plumbing our line, putting hose line in, and then that way we can fully extinguish the hot spots. So it's going to be a work in progress, but as far as actual control line, we've got that there, so that gives us a nice catcher's mitt, if you will, to stop any advancement of the fire, and that's where we're there. But there is going to be more hard work in there, but we're feeling really good, and we're another step closer.
And Billy on Twitter wants to know, is it safe for my family to swim in the San Lorenzo River near Ben Lomond this weekend?
What I do know is that the water quality, and that's more so for the municipal water systems, is they do have an advisory to not drink that water or even boil that water, because they did have some compromise to their actual water system. As far as the river itself, it's basically, it should be fine as far as there's no contaminants, even any sort of minor runoff that did hit the river, which was extremely limited from any of the ash. It should have no effect, so it should be pretty normal. It's just the fact that if it still is an evacuated area, obviously you don't want to be in that evacuated area. If it's an area that's been repopulated, then you can recreate in that particular area as you need. What we do ask is, in some of the areas that are the trail systems in the state park, Fall Creek State Park, that you not go there, because we are still actively working in those areas. There is still a lot of work going on, still hazard trees and so forth, and ash pits. So please don't try to recreate in those areas, and they are closed, by the way.
And Meg on Facebook says, can you speak to the neighborhood around Hubbard Gulch Road in Ben Lomond, in between the fire perimeter and Route 9? When you say lines are being established up the Route 9 corridor, what does that mean in this area?
So that Hubbard Gulch, that's an area that we've had a lot of work in ongoing work. So when we have lines, it means that we've have the hand lines done by the hand crews. So it's a fire control line where we dig into through the material, the ground material in the forest, and we take it down to bare mineral soil, so something that will not burn. And what that is it stops any sort of progression of the fire. It won't burn, obviously, the dirt, and so that stops any sort of progression. Right now, the fire, and that's been doing for a number of days, has been slowly creeping through that ground material, that duff that we call it, and so when it gets to that bare mineral soil, it'll stop that burn progression. Although we have seen some of it, as it's burned deep down, it goes in the root system underneath and it pops up outside of our lines. So again, that's why we continue to work there, why we have a strong presence in some of those areas, because some of those areas are really our only access. We have very few access areas to a lot of the fire, and so some of those roads that have been impacted and we've kept evacuated is because they're narrow roads, they're roads that are the only access we can put our fire apparatus into, our crews, so it's really gummed up with the equipment. As soon as we can negate that fire problem or that safety issue, then we're going to be moving out of those communities and we will repopulate them as soon as possible.
For more information regarding the local impact of the Bay Area wildfires here in Cupertino, please visit cupertino.org/2020fires.